Good morning, welcome to chapter 4, The Grand High Witch. The next day, a man in a black suit arrived at the house carrying a briefcase, and he held a long conversation with my grandmother in the living room. I was not allowed in while he was there, but when at last he went away, my grandmother came in to me, walking slowly and looking very sad. "That man was reading me your father's will," she said. "What's a will?" I asked. "Well, it's something you write before you die," she said. "And in it you say who's going to have your money and your property. But most important of all, it says who's going to look after you if both of your parents are dead." A fearful panic took over me. "It did say you though, Grandmama. I don't have to go and live with somebody else, do I?" "No," she said. "Your father would never have done that. He's asked me to take care of you for as long as I live, but he has asked that I take you back to your own house in England. He wants us to stay there." "But why?" I said. "Why can't we stay here in Norway? You'd hate to live anywhere else. You told me you would." "I know," she said. "There's lots of complications with money and the house, things that you wouldn't understand. And it also said in the will that although your family is Norwegian, you were born in England and you've started your education there, and he wants you to continue to go to an English school." "Oh, Grandmama," I cried, "you don't want to live in our English house. I know you don't." "Of course I don't," she said, "but I'm afraid I must. The will said that your mother felt the same way about it, and it's important to respect the wishes of our parents." There was no way out of it. We had to go to England, and my grandmother started making arrangements at once. "Your next school term begins in a few days," she said, "so we don't have any time to waste." On the evening before we left for England, my grandmother got onto her favourite subject once again. "There are not as many witches in England as there are in Norway," she said. "I'm sure I won't meet one," I said. "Well, I sincerely hope you don't, because those witches in England are probably the most vicious in the whole world." As she sat there smoking her foul cigar and talking away, I kept looking at the hand with the missing thumb. I couldn't help it. I was fascinated by it, and I kept wondering what awful thing had happened that time she met a witch. It must have been something so absolutely appalling and gruesome, otherwise she would have told me about it. Maybe the thumb had been twisted off, or perhaps she'd been forced to jam her thumb down the spout of a boiling kettle and it was steamed away. Or did someone pull it out of her hand like a tooth? I couldn't help trying to guess. "Tell me about those English witches. What do they do, Grandmama?" I said. "Well," she said, sucking away at her stinking cigar, "their favourite ruse is to mix up a powder that will turn a child into a creature or something that other grown-ups don't like." "What kind of creature, Grandmama?" "Well, often it's a slug," she said. "A slug is one of their favourites. Then the grown-up steps on the slug and squishes it without knowing it's a child." "Oh, that's perfectly beastly," I cried. "Might be a flea," my grandmother said. "They might turn you into a flea, and without realising what she was doing, your own mother would get out the flea powder and then, poof, it's goodbye to you." "You're making me nervous, Grandmama. I don't think I want to go back to England." "I've known English witches," she went on. "They've turned children into pheasants and then sneaked the pheasants into the woods the day before the pheasant shooting season opened." "Oh, so they got shot?" "Well, of course they got shot," she said. "And then they get plucked, and then they get roasted, and they're eaten for supper." I pictured myself as a pheasant flying frantically over the men with guns, swerving and dipping as the guns exploded around me. "Yes," my grandmother said. "It gives the English witches great pleasure to stand back and watch the grown-ups doing away with their own children." I really don't want to go to England, Grandmama." "Well, of course you don't," she said. "Nor do I, but I'm afraid we have to." "Are witches different in every country?" I asked. "Completely," my grandmother said. "But I don't know much about many other countries." "Do you know about America?" I asked. Not really," she answered. "Although I have heard it said that the witches are able to make grown-ups eat their own children." "Never!" I cried. "Oh no, Grandma, that simply can't be true." "I don't know whether it's true or not," she said. "It's only a rumour I've heard." How could they possibly make them eat their own children? I asked. Well, they turn them into hot dogs, she said. That wouldn't be too difficult for a clever witch. Does every single country in the world have witches? I asked. Whether you find people, you find witches, my grandmother said. There is a secret society of witches in every country. And do they all know one another, Grandmama? They do not, she said. A witch only knows the witches in her own country. She's strictly forbidden to communicate with any foreign witches. But an English witch, for example, will know all the other witches in England. They're all friends. They ring each other up and swap deadly recipes. Goodness knows what they talk about. I hate to think. I sat on the floor watching my grandmother. She put a cigar stub in the ashtray and folded her hands across her stomach. Once a year, she went on, the witches of each separate country hold their own secret meeting. They all get together in one place and receive a lecture from the Grand High Witch of the world. From who? I cried. She is the ruler of them all, my grandmother said. She's all-powerful and without mercy. All the other witches are petrified of her. They see her only once a year at their annual meeting. She goes there to whip up excitement and enthusiasm and to give orders. The Grand High Witch travels from country to country attending those annual meetings. Where do they have those meetings, Grandmama? Well, there's all kinds of rumours, she said. I heard it said that they just book into a hotel like any other group of women who are holding a meeting. I have also heard it said that some very peculiar things go on in these hotels. It's rumoured that the beds are never slept in, that there are burn marks on the bedroom carpet, that toads are discovered in the bathtubs, and that down in the kitchen, the cook once found a baby crocodile swimming in his saucepan of soup. My grandmother picked up her cigar and took another puff, inhaling the foul smoke deeply into her lungs. Where does the Grand High Witch live when she's at home? I asked. Nobody knows, my grandmother said. If we knew that, then she would be rooted out and destroyed. Witchophiles all over the world would have spent their lives trying to discover the secret headquarters of the Grand High Witch. What's a witchophile, Grandmama? It's a person who studies witches and knows a lot about them, my grandmother said. Are you a witchophile, Grandmama? I'm a retired witchophile, she said. I'm too old to be active any longer, but when I was younger, I travelled all over the world trying to track down the Grand High Witch, and I never came even close to succeeding. Is she rich? I asked. She's rolling, my grandmother said, simply rolling in money. Rumour has it that there's a machine in her headquarters, which is exactly like the machine the government uses to print banknotes, and you and I use. And after all, banknotes are only bits of paper with special designs and pictures on them. Anyone could make them who has the right machine and the right paper. My guess is that the Grand High Witch makes all the money she wants and she dishes it out to witches everywhere. What about foreign money? I asked. Those machines can make Chinese money if you want them to, my grandma said. It's only a question of pressing the right button. But Grandmama, I said, if nobody's ever seen the Grand High Witch, how can you be so sure she exists? My grandmother gave me a long and very severe look. Nobody has ever seen the devil, but we know he exists. The next morning we sailed for England and soon I was back in the old family house in Kent, but this time with only my grandmother to look after me. Then the Easter term began and every weekday I went to school and everything seemed to have gone back to normal. Now at the bottom of our garden there's an enormous conker tree, and high up in its branches, Timmy, my best friend, and I had started to build a magnificent tree house. We were able to work on it only at the weekends, but we were getting along fine. We began with the floor, which we built by layering wide planks between two quite far apart branches and nailing them down. Within a month, we'd finished the floor. Then we constructed a wooden railing around the floor that left only a roof to be built. The roof was going to be the difficult build. One Saturday afternoon, when Timmy was in bed with flu, I decided to make a start on the roof all by myself. It was lovely being high up there in that conker tree, all alone with the pale young leaves coming out everywhere around me. It was like being in a big green cave, and the height made it extra exciting. My grandmother had told me that if I fell I would break a leg, and every time I looked down I got a tingle down my spine. I worked away, nailing first plank on the roof, then suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a woman standing immediately below me. She was looking up at me, and smiling in the most peculiar way. When most people smile, their lips go sideways, but this woman's went upwards and downwards, showing front teeth and gums, and the gums were like raw meat. It's always a shock to discover that you're being watched when you think you're alone. And what was this strange woman doing in our garden anyway? I noticed that she was wearing a small black hat. She had black gloves on her hands, and the gloves came almost up to her elbows. Gloves! She was wearing gloves! And I froze all over. "Come down from that tree, little boy," she said, "and I shall give you the most exciting present you've ever had." Her voice had a curious rasping quality. It made a sort of metallic sound as though her throat was full of drawing pins. Without taking her eyes off my face, she very slowly put one of those gloved hands into her purse and pulled out a small green snake. She held it up to me. "It's tame," she said. The snake began to coil itself around her arm. It was a brilliant green. "If you come down, I shall give him to you," she said. "Oh, Grandmama," I thought, "come help me, please." And then I panicked. I dropped the hammer and shot up that enormous tree like a monkey. I didn't stop until I was as high as I could go, and there I stayed, quivering with fear. I couldn't see the woman now. There were layers and layers of leaves between her and me. I stayed up there for hours and kept very still. It began to grow dark, and at last I heard my grandmother calling my name. "I'm up here," I shouted. "Come down at once," she called. "It's past your supper time." "Grandmama," I shouted, "has that woman gone?" "What woman?" my grandmother called back. "The woman in the black gloves." There was silence from below. It was the silence of somebody who was too stunned to speak. "Grandmama," I shouted again, "has she gone?" "Yes," my grandmother answered at last. "She's gone. I'm here, my darling. I'll look after you. You can come down now." I climbed down and I was trembling. My grandmother enfolded me in her arms. "I've seen a witch," I said. "Come inside," she said. "You'll be all right with me." She led me in the house and gave me a cup of hot cocoa with lots of sugar in it. "Tell me everything," she said, and I told her. By the time I'd finished, it was my grandmother who was trembling. Her face was ashy grey, and I saw her glance down at that hand of hers that didn't have a thumb. "You know what this means?" she said. "It means that there is one of them in our district. From now on, I'm not letting you walk alone to school." "Do you think she could be after me especially?" I asked. "No," she said, "I doubt that. One child is as good as any other of those creatures." It's hardly surprising that after that I became very witch-conscious. If I happened to be alone and on the road and I saw a woman approaching who was wearing gloves, I would quickly skip across to the side. And as the weather remained pretty cold during the whole of that month, nearly everyone was wearing gloves. Curiously enough, though, I never saw the woman with the green snake again. That was my first witch, but it wasn't my last. See you tomorrow for Chapter 5, Summer Holidays. Bye.